Robert, you're a former Lord Chancellor. What would you say to the Immigration Minister, your colleague Robert Jenrick, who's pushing for emergency legislation to disapply the Human Rights Act and direct the courts to ignore the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights? What would be your message to him?
Well, I would say proceed with care. I myself, as a minister, have successfully brought in ouster clauses. That's clauses that oust the jurisdiction of the courts in immigration appeals. And in fact, only last week, the Court of Appeal upheld the very ouster clause that I brought in the Judicial Review Reform Act. So it can work, but it needs to be very, very carefully couched, very clear and based upon a rationale that is respectable and works. My worry about taking wholesale approaches to, remove and oust the jurisdiction of the court in this way is that inevitably it will not just lead to legal challenge, although you can't obviously, strike down primary legislation. It's going to lead to conflict between what the domestic law says and what our international treaty obligations are. And I think that's just a recipe for disaster, frankly, bearing in mind Britain's reputation and role in the world. And using those sort of nuclear options to deal with what is a very small part of the government's response to the small boats crisis is, I think, at best a diversion, and at worst it's massive overkill when it comes to how to deal with this issue.
And when you say recipe for disaster, what do you think the knock-on effects will be for our standing as a country?
Well, I think people are going to start questioning, whether Britain is serious about its leadership and role in the world. The Council of Europe was something that we helped set up after the war. We've shown real moral and political and defence leadership on issues like Ukraine. And I think it's been really good for the reputation of this country that we've done that under the leadership of successive Conservative prime ministers. And at a time when the world is looking for countries that are stable, that believe in the rule of law, that offer certainty, it's not just good for our standing internationally, it's good for investment and our economy too.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.